It is with profound personal satisfaction that I sit to write a review of Baz Luhrmann's recent adaptation of the F. Scott Fitzgerald classic, The Great Gatsby. There was truly no better director to bring Gatsby to the screen, and I was transfixed from start to finish. Those familiar with Luhrmann's work will know him best for his ability to bring grandeur, pomp, and decadent circumstance to his films, and The Great Gatsby continues beautifully in the tradition established by Romeo and Juliet and Moulin Rouge. And again, we see a sort of alternate dimension where modern-day pop culture conventions blend seamlessly with perfectly realized period clothing and set design. Surprisingly, this doesn't distract from the story of Gatsby in the slightest. Much to the contrary, Luhrmann's strength is in putting a fresh surge of life into the long-neglected classics, and as such, it seems utterly natural for Gatsby's parties to feature heavily electronicized contemporary music, or for a passing car to be blasting H to the Izzo from its radio. Somehow these blatant intrusions don't distract from the setting. Rather, they serve to bring the modern viewer into the moment, dusting off the annals of history and injecting them with the passion and immediacy we feel for contemporary culture. Predictably, this is not set well with critics who seem to be hoping to receive a sense of academic validation by lambasting the film's treatment of the source material, which they, as the old guard of the arts and intellectualism, feel honor-bound to protect. I reject harshly the notion that modern adaptations of the classics should be only presented in the dullest, most agonizingly uninteresting manner so that the critics, ever the ultimate hipsters, can pat themselves on the back and lavish themselves in an orgy of pretentiousness as they pretend to appreciate an insufferable recitation of a masterwork, squeezing out the juice that made it a masterwork in the first place. What makes Luhrmann's Gatsby work is what makes all of his films work. He loves to direct small chamber dramas with the rapid-fire zeal of a great action movie director, and the bombastic camera work and wild gesticulations of his actors add an almost danceable sense of immediacy to the tempo of the story. Luhrmann is keenly aware that a period piece, especially one built around a classic of literature that most of us were forced to read in high school, is going to be met with extensive eye rolling from the movie-going public, and so he grabs you by the wrist and doesn't let go, never giving his audience the time to get bored. This conveys the underlying themes of The Great Gatsby, a critique of bourgeois depravity during Prohibition, the ultimate absurdity of love, and the silent, mournful detachment of wisdom with sterling clarity. In addition to this, Luhrmann understands that Gatsby is ultimately a symbolist tome, and his eccentricity serves to accentuate that symbolism. I was pleased to see someone that understood the significance of the spectacles on the billboard, the green light across the bay, the Valley of Ashes, and much more. Each of these are, despite the film's grandiose bombast, handled with a remarkable reverence that, combined with Carraway's first-person narrative from the novel, gives the film a sense of respect for the source material that few adaptations are willing to honor. His eccentricities do not distract or demean the characters or the plot, they accentuate them. What is remarkable is that the pop surrealism of Luhrmann's style is not as pervasive as in previous efforts. Instead, it comes on strong at the beginning of the film and fades gradually throughout as the mood darkens and the tone becomes increasingly serious. In this way, the film follows Nick Carraway's transition from naive young man among decadent playboys to mature though disillusioned adult, and completes the process by gradually transitioning out of the dreamlike trance of the first half. By the time Gatsby's affair with Daisy is exposed and her husband confronts them both, the film has shifted into a purely serious and staunchly realist tone, as if to say that the party is finally over and reality is not only setting in but apparent on no uncertain terms. Casting is paramount, and the film does not disappoint. Leonardo DiCaprio has finally matured into the actor that he's been striving towards since his teenage debut, and he carries the role of Gatsby with the grandeur and dignity of Robert Redford, but adds a heavy touch of a young Marlon Brando, and the gruffness that simmers just beneath his skin throughout the role lends him the perfect sense of dramatic tension. I saw the film with a friend, and one thing we discussed was whether or not Leo had played the role over the top for the sake of camp. We ultimately concluded that this was actually necessary to convey the character correctly. Gatsby's world is a lie, and Gatsby himself is a lie. The difference is that his world is a lie because of the shallow superficiality of those involved, while his own lie, that he is in fact from a common background and attained his fortune through organized crime, is far more serious and troublesome. It is pointed out in Gatsby's backstory that he rises out of poverty as a young man by sheer force of will and a deeply ingrained vision of himself as a great man. The story explores the paradox of Gatsby's attaining overwhelming success via the fickle appreciation of the very same decadent sleaze that he sees himself as superior to. Ultimately, Gatsby's inability to convince Daisy to leave her husband is the result of his attaining the image of greatness while denying the fact of his own emptiness. His inability to move on from Daisy's rejection 5 years prior has left him to think that she will fill the void, and as such his soul remains as hollow and cavernous as his mansion. DiCaprio plays this character perfectly. The regal grandeur of Gatsby's character of Gatsby's carefully defined persona, cracking elegantly throughout the film to the point that the gunshot which ends his life resonates as the sum total of his own dishonesty with himself, the blank wall at the end of the alley that has been his life. At the end of the film, Gatsby's corpse lands in the water of the pool exactly as his killer fires a second bullet to commit suicide. The meaning is morbidly clear. The sequence of events that have proceeded from Gatsby's actions have come to a deafening halt. All that is left is for Nick Carraway to make sense of everything that he has seen. The rest of the cast, Tobey Maguire as Nick Carraway, Carey Mulligan as Daisy Buchanan, Joel Edgerton as Tom Buchanan, Isla Fisher as Myrtle Wilson, and so on, are all spot on. They play their parts perfectly and are perfectly cast, and their performances are flawless, but they are ultimately footnotes to the central character and the resonating performance by DiCaprio. The Great Gatsby is more than an excellent adaptation of an excellent story. It is the output of a director who understands the source material perfectly and transfers not just the story of the novel, but his love of the novel to the big screen. I truly wish that Baz Luhrmann had directed the Atlas Shrugged film adaptations. He would have been able to make the films more than just asinine exercises in sleep induction.